certain bibliography is given. So what are we going to do? We are going to mainly study or go through the book of Acts. And when time comes, we are going to spend time on various letters of Paul that Paul wrote during his ministry. Right? Let's look at title here. Book of Acts. Acts may not have originally had a title since it was written as the second volume of two-volume work. Yeah? Acts originally may not have a title. Why? Because it was one book. What is that? Book of Acts was the continuation of book of Luke. It was a continuation. Right? So how do you know that it was continuation? Let's look at Acts chapter 1, verse 1. Can one of you please read? Acts 1, verse 1. One of you please read. All right, no one needs to read. Let me read. The first account I composed, Theophilus, about all that Jesus began to do and to teach. All right. Now here's a question. I hope you are not sleeping there, right? I hope you are not sleeping, all of you. Right, you are with me because you all have turned off the video.
Yes, we are with you, sir.
Okay. So, all right. So if you look at Acts chapter 1, verse 1, you will see the first account I composed, Theophilus, about all that Jesus began to do and teach. So if you compare that to Luke 1, go into Luke chapter 1, verse 1 to 4, gives you some clues of what Luke is really doing. Let's look at Luke 1, verse 1 to 4. Anyone?
Inasmuch as many have taken in hand to set in order a narrative of those things which have been fulfilled among us, just as those who from the beginning were eyewitnesses and ministers of the word delivered them to us. It seemed good to me also, having had perfect understanding of all things from the very first, to write to you an orderly account, most excellent Theophilus, that you may know the certainty of those things in which you were instructed.
Yes, here is a governor, Theophilus, who is being taught God's word, gospel. Yes. And what happened? Luke is writing to this man, Theophilus, about what really happened. So that is the first account. And then what you have in the book of Acts is the second account written to Theophilus, a second account. So actually, Acts is the second part of the book that is letter or book that is written to Theophilus. So Luke is recording a history of what Jesus did, who was he, and what happened after his death in the book of Acts. So ancient authors often divided their works up into books, right? They always divided. And Acts, and Luke and Acts would be too large for one papyrus scroll, right? It was too big, right? So most of all scholars believe that the evidence, linguistic, grammatical, thematic, and theological evidence argues strongly for the unity of Luke and Acts. It's just continuation. Gospel of Luke and Acts are actually one book written by this man, Luke, who was a doctor plus a historian. That is usually what people say. We'll look at that. Probably in the later part of the first or part of the second century, maybe this time, early part of 2nd century, Acts was separated from Luke and took its present place in the canon. All right? So this is separated later. So in the beginning, this was one book. Acts, Luke and Acts was actually one book in the beginning. It's a big one. The manuscripts have various titles, all includes the word Acts, right? Copies of what Luke written is now in many places, they all have that Greek word praxe or Acts, evidently meant to suggest both movement and advance of the gospel and heroic exploits by the apostles, right? What did they do? How gospel was advanced and how heroically the apostle exploited various places through the gospel. You'll read the heading as the Acts of Apostles, right? Acts of Apostles. Actually, the reference to the apostles in the title of many manuscripts is somewhat misleading. This is somewhat misleading. Why? Actually, Book of Acts is not the record of all the apostles, because this work deals almost exclusively with the Peter and Paul and the persons and events associated with their ministry. All right? So Book of Acts, actually this is the Acts of Peter and Paul along with their companions. All right, so it doesn't record the acts of all the apostles, if that's what it is meant. That's not. Now, importance. I wanted to look at the importance. The earliest division of the NT canon was in two parts: the gospel and the apostles. If you look at the earliest division of the NT, Gospels were one portion, not the Acts, but rest of the writings like letters were another portion. Acts actually bridged the gap between Gospel and Apostle. You don't have the word letters that time, they all simply say Apostle. If you say the word Apostle, it refers to all the writings after Acts. All the writing after Acts are known as apostle, right?
Epistles, Pastor. Epistles. Epistle. E-P-I-S-T-L.
No. I'm saying in the earliest division, like in the beginning of the church, they divided the New Testament into basically two. One is gospel, another one is apostle. Gospel is the four gospels. Apostle means it is grouping us all the letters they wrote. And Book of Acts was kind of in the middle, right? Acts provides the necessary background for understanding the epistles. It's like Old Testament provides background for the New Testament. Book of Acts provides understanding for the epistles that are written. It answers such obvious question: how did Gentiles receive the gospel? And how did Christianity move from small Palestinian sect to a worldwide religion? That's what it answers, right? This is why Acts was separated from Luke and moved its present position in canon. Authorship, I'm not going to talk much about the authorship. You can just look at this is maybe one verse would help us, right? Let's look at Colossians 4:14. Anyone read Colossians?
Our dear friend Luke, the doctor, and Demas send greetings.
All right. Most of the people believe that this was written by Luke. We will see maybe but Luke is known as beloved physician, right? Beloved physician. He's a beloved doctor, right? Now, so how do you know that this is written by Luke? Of course, the author indicates that he was not an eyewitness of ministry of Jesus. All right, the author was not an eyewitness. All right, so he is kind of a second generation Christian. And this is his Greek, best Hellenistic Greek, the best Greek language in the New Testament is in the Luke and Acts, the best Greek language. So someone who well versed with the Greek, but he does not appear to be like Hebrew and Aramaic much. So that is one thing. So maybe, so that suggests that he was a Gentile. He was maybe a Gentile, could be a Gentile, and outside of Palestine, right? Outside of Palestine. So all this information tells that, and this is reference to Luke, because he was not a Jew. Yes, he was not a Jew, and he was outside of Palestine. His Greek is one of the outstanding Greek language in the New Testament. But study of we in the book of Acts suggests that Acts was written by an unnamed friend, a traveling companion of Paul. All right, because the author uses the word we, so it looks like someone was traveling with Paul, which we know that it was Luke who traveled with Paul, which also suggests that Luke has the right. All right, so that is the main important thing. So basically, most of the people understand that this is written by Luke. Now, when it is written, it's written early, like in the 60s, right? 60s. Why? Because the last chapter, that is 28, takes us to the second year of Paul's imprisonment, somewhere around here. 28. It doesn't talk about Paul's death. No. Right? It talks about only Paul's imprisonment. So that suggests that it is written a little early. Now, terminus ad quam, right? The upper limit. What is the maximum we can go? Maximum date. Yes, there is no mention of Jewish revolt or fall of Jerusalem, which happened in AD 70. Luke is a historian. He should have said about the fall of Jerusalem and Jewish revolt. He did not say. Jewish revolt happened AD 66 against the Romans. He did not mention that. So he has written this is before that. Luke connects Christianity with Judaism, thus views it as a legal religion. But that was not true after this. No, Christianity became illegal after that. There is no mention of Nero's persecution after burning of Rome in AD 64. Luke doesn't mention. Luke doesn't mention that as well. Luke has a high view of Roman justice and hopeful outlook for Christianity, its acceptance by Rome, which is not true after AD 64. So this all suggests that the book of Acts written early, before 64, some in between 62 and 64. All right, let's look at purpose and then we will stop. Why this is written? Why book of Acts is written? primary purpose. This is written, Luke wrote, the main reason he stated, to write an accurate account of the history of the Christian beginning. Right? Purpose was what? To write an accurate account of the Christian beginning, so that Theophilus and those like him who were receptive but had questions might know the certainty of what had been taught to them about Jesus Christ. Maybe Theophilus was a Luke's patron, was maybe someone who was putting up money for the publication of Luke's literary effort. Maybe someone was pouring money for his writing. In carrying out this purpose, Luke is selective in his reporting in order to show how Christianity, which began a small Jewish sect, moved from Jerusalem to Rome, where it became a worldwide religion. Worldwide religion. All right, so Christianity, how became a worldwide religion? That is what he answers. Of course, there is historical and theological purposes. It is a history with a theological purpose. So the church, for example, for Luke, is the continuation of God's purpose in history. Historical events are brought about by the will of God, many times in fulfillment of Old Testament scripture. He says, this is also part of God's plan. Finally, apologetic. One more thing we need to remember about the book of Acts. It is probable that Luke was concerned about defending Christianity. Why? Because he's not reporting all the events, but he reports numerous encounters between Christians and Roman officials. A lot of encounters. This is to demonstrate that the Roman government viewed Christianity not as subversive, but legally respectable religion serving a good purpose. So he was trying to defend Christianity to present Roman governments accept Christianity as a legal religion because it serves a good purpose. That's what he hoped, but it could not happen because they did not take that way. All right, so that is the purpose of the book of Acts mainly in his writing.